Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. We've got another Dendrobium Kiki from Lynn. This one seems to have a variety of ways of writing it, but it's basically got bugs. We'll deal with them in a minute. Well, let's deal with them now while I think about it. Might have got on them here, might have got them from here. I don't think Lynn's got bugs, but it's just a couple of tiny ones, so that'll do. That was 70% rubbing alcohol, before anybody asks. Right, this is Dendrobium nobile, the species, and it's the variety, depending on where you see it written, Cooksonii or Cooksonianum. I've seen this written more often, including with RHS next to it, as Dendrobium nobile and Cooksonianum in quotes as a variety. So I might stick with that. We shall see. Anyway, the first job, inspecting the roots. I'm going to mount this, and some of these roots are too long. Now, those with growing tips get to stay. Those without growing tips I'm going to shorten, and that will normally force them to branch, and that guarantees they're in the moss. But I'm also going to go very careful, because I noticed this root here, you might be able to see that, has got two tiny green branches starting. So I will trim the tip and encourage those to grow, because they will be in the moss. We also have a nice short root here at the base that will grow into the moss. That's short enough and young enough to actually attach to the mount with any luck. Now these are slightly flexible. I'm just going to dunk them in some water. Oh, they're greening up nicely. I'm dunking them in some water so that they become a little more flexible, because I am going to have to bend them. Right, I've got my mount, it's been sterilised. I've got some wire. I tend to use wire on mounts nowadays, wire cutters, and some moss. Now that's soaking in water with a little bit of seaweed in it. Helps things recover from shock, separated from the mother plant, and whatever else. Now I'm going to put, this is going to get mounted for now. I'll say for now because this is often found as a terrestrial or lithophyte, so not very often as an epiphyte, and as such would probably prefer to go in a fine media. Yes and no. It also needs a very distinct winter rest if you're going to get any blooms on it. Now obviously I have no interest in attempting for blooms on a Kiki. Let's get some growth first. Now it's not actively growing at the moment. I would suggest that's its terminal leaf. Yeah, more upright and smaller, and no sign of another leaf coming. So that's probably finished growing, which means we may have to wait until next year to get a growth from the base. We shall see. Anyway, that needs to go on a little bit of moss. That's a very, very thin layer of moss. It's going to get even thinner. And that's just to go underneath the roots. Now some people put the roots directly on the bark. Bearing in mind these roots are highly unlikely to attach, apart from that new one and the side shoots. They're not going to attach. They're aerial roots. That's how they've grown, and that's how they will want to continue. So let's get myself a length of wire here. It's always difficult to judge, but this type of wire, bonsai wire, relatively is dirt cheap by length, because the coils of bonsai wire are sold by weight. So this is 100 grams. Obviously the thinner the wire, the more you get. I mean, in the length of the coil that you get. The really thick chunky stuff's only got about 6 turns. Right, so I'm going to put one turn on now to hold the plant. And all that means is I'm just going to bend the end round to pinch. That's all I need to do with that. There's a lot of my moss fallen off. I want to get one turn round the plant and another one round the majority of the roots. This is where the bending comes in. Hopefully no breaking. Gotcha. Right, so that's got the roots held and the plant held. Now we can put our moss on top. If you're doing a mount, don't cover the base of the plant. It's alright having a little bit of moss behind it, but don't cover the base. If you cover the base, you could start some rot. Yeah, because the moss will hold water. It will be constantly wet. So it's advisable not to cover the base of the plant. The moss is for the roots. If you imagine the plant in its origins, if it was on a tree, growing as an epiphyte, then obviously the base of the plant would stick out the top of whatever it was growing in. Right, I'm happy with that. Now we go round a few times to hold that moss in place and give some extra support for those roots. Now this doesn't need to be tight. You're not garrotting it, you're just holding it in place. And just enough, and it is just enough as well, to go around the back and find that original bit that we pushed around there. Give that a twist. There we go. Trim the pointy ends off so that you don't keep catching your finger on it. I haven't done a tag for this yet. I've still got to make up my mind how I'm going to write it. And then with the curvature of the mount, what I do is push the wires in, and that just pulls them a little bit tighter, holds everything in place. Now what I've got to do is try and, although here comes Misery Gats, just woken up. He scuttled off upstairs because the boiler man's just been and fixed the boiler, so we have a working boiler again. I'm just putting a bit of moss over that root with the two little shoots on it, try and encourage those to grow. Let me just let Mojo out. Come on then. Right, so there we go. As I said, I trimmed some roots, the reason being it is a branching root system, and by taking the root tips off, some of them will branch. These two long ones I've left. Yeah? You might say, well, why don't you trim those and get those to branch as well? I'm de-risking it by leaving two on there to grow. Yeah? They may still branch up under the moss, who knows? So that's it. And this is a very, very distinct rest in winter, or you won't get blooms. The Nobly hybrids that many have probably got and know quite well, they could do with a decent rest and a reasonable drop in temperature and an increase in light in the winter to get some blooms. Chances are a lot of them would bloom anyway if you did none of that. But the more you can do towards that rest, the better the plant will respond with blooms, providing it's healthy, of course. But Nobly, the species, if you don't do the rest, you'll probably get next to none or even no blooms at all. So the rest is important. Now, under normal circumstances, with a mature plant that is blooming size, probably the previous year's canes will start to yellow their leaves in the autumn as you go into winter. That really is the signal to start reducing everything. You reduce the feed down to eventually nothing and the water down to next to nothing, and increase the light and decrease the temperature, and then give it the smallest amount of water you can get away with to stop the canes totally shriveling, and that's how you will get the blooms. And it's not a trick, that's how it's evolved to grow. Where it actually grows a deciduous forest, so the light level goes up in the winter time, and it's the dry season. The summer season is the wet season, where it doesn't necessarily need the bright light. It's got better temperatures, but come the winter time, the fact that it's in deciduous forest tells you something. Why are the trees dumping their leaves then? It's because they can't support the leaves through the winter months. Yeah? So this orchid virtually follows suit, and some canes will dump their leaves annually, some canes will dump their leaves after 2 years, so they will get to the end of the second season. New growth starts in the spring, keeps its leaves through the winter, dumps them towards the end of the following season. And the Dendrobium nobile does bloom on leafless canes, and it can push out some blooms on canes that have still got leaves on. So it's quite a mixture. So there we go. Anyway, no tag, but as it's a single kiki, and let me have a look, I believe, yes, it's the only mount with a single kiki on, I'll know what it is, won't I? So there we go, moss not round the base, roots covered apart from these longer ones which should carry on growing. Humidity at this time of year is high in here, and hopefully the ones that have been trimmed will branch, and those two with that root with the little tiny 2 shoots on hopefully will start growing. Those will probably be the first roots to find their way in and attach to the bark. And any other new roots will probably attach, including that new one that's just started at the base, that's just there, just under the moss. And it's got very little moss under the tip, so the tip will touch the bark very quickly if it carries on growing. So there you go, Dendrobium nobile, and I'm going to call it variety Cooksianum. I suspect that's the way I've seen it written more often than not. But I will do some research into whether that Cooksianum needs a capital C or not. If it's a species variety, a variety of a species, which I believe it is, then it should be a small c, lowercase c. But we'll find all that out when eventually I get round to doing a tag, which is not now. It's too hot out here. I've got the fan off and this place is like an oven at the moment, so I need to get back into the lounge in the cool. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.